What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. It is time to give you my upset alert games as we head into Week 8 of the 2024 college football season. We have a bunch of great games coming up this weekend, and this was a really hard upset alert video to choose from. We've had so many great games in the last couple weeks now, and also basically 3 weeks, but this weekend's upset alert video was trying to find the 8 games that I think are going to be basically like an upset. We go from the least likely to most likely. Going back to my upset alert video from last week before we get into Week 8, in my Week 7 upset alert video, we had 3 total upsets that happened that were on the video for me. Arizona State upsetting Utah, that was on the video. That was an upset that I really saw coming. The Sun Devils pulling off the upset there. And then Oregon upsetting Ohio State. Maybe that was a game that I probably saw coming, but I feel like Ohio State, I was favoring them in that one, but the Ducks did get the upset either way, and then LSU upsetting Ole Miss. That is a game that went into overtime, and of course that was on the video, and that was another game that I was really seeing an upset that could happen. So we had 3 upsets last week, and what we do in these upset alert videos, we take 8 games total, 4 games each, and pick 4 of the 8 games and 8 of the games that are least likely to be upsets, and then the other 4 games are most likely to be upsets. And in order for me to call it an upset alert type game, the spread has to be in single digits in order for me to call it an upset. And I just do top 25 matchups and then top 25 versus unranked matchups, and whoever that team is on upset alert, that team, or actually the team with the highest ranking, is on upset alert. So let's go ahead and get right into these games here for upset alert. We'll start from the least likely and work our way to the most likely upset alert games for week number 8. And we'll start with the least likely category. We'll start here with SMU and Stanford, an ACC conference game at 10:15 Eastern Time on October 19th on Saturday. So yeah, late night game here on Saturday night, 10:15 Eastern Time on the ACC network. SMU favored by 14.5, and the over and under is at 54.5. You got SMU coming out of a bye week, so there really wasn't much to talk about SMU from this past weekend, but this is a team that's kind of getting better and better each and every single game. They're still kind of one of those teams that can still make it to the ACC championship. I know they lost to BYU, but that was not a conference game, but ever since that loss to BYU, that's been a really good loss for them, and this team just continues to get better and better. And then Stanford here, they're coming off a brutal loss to Notre Dame. I don't really expect an upset here to happen because Stanford is obviously not that really good. I know this game is out west here for SMU, but I know, some teams probably could struggle here to go out west. We saw Miami do that, of course, a couple weeks ago, but I don't think an upset here will happen for SMU. So I got SMU and Stanford. This game again at 10:15 Eastern Time on the ACC network, and the Mustangs are favored by 14.5. Next up, we got UCF and Iowa State in the Big 12 at 7:30 Eastern Time on Fox Sports 1. The Cyclones favored by 14 in this one, and the over and under is at 47.5. You got Iowa State coming off that road win against West Virginia. This is a team that's undefeated at 6-0, and they've been pretty good this year. This is a really well-coached team. I wasn't really expecting Iowa State here to be at 6-0 at the beginning of the season, in my opinion, but this team just continues to get better as well. I didn't really, like I said, expect them to be a top 10 team and also be 6-0 here in the first half of the season. UCF, on the other hand, this has kind of been a disappointing start here to the season for the Knights. KJ Jefferson, he was replaced, of course, in the game. UCF, of course, did not look good against Colorado a couple weeks ago. So yeah, the Knights, they're really well coached, by Gus Malzahn, but it has just not been a really good start here to the season here for the Knights. But you never know. It's the Big 12. I mean, any game can pretty much come down to the wire. That's been the case with the Big 12 this year. There's been a lot of great games and obviously a lot of great upsets that happened already, and there is a ton of priority in this conference. So yeah, Iowa State probably could be on upset alert even though they're at home, and I know the spread is in double digits and it's also a 14-point spread here for Iowa State. But like I said, when it comes to the Big 12, a lot of these teams are going to beat up on each other, and you never know. UCF could pull off the upset here. But again, I don't really think an upset here is going to happen. This is my least likely upset alert games for the 4 games here. So this one is at 7:30 Eastern Time on Fox Sports 1, UCF and Iowa State. Next up, we got another Big 12 game, Oklahoma State and BYU at 10:15 Eastern Time. This one on Friday night, so it's a late night Friday night game on ESPN. BYU is favored by 10.5, and the over and under is at 55.5. You got BYU that's undefeated at 6-0. They took care of business against Arizona. I think BYU has kind of been the best team in the Big 12 this year. They have beaten their teams. They've beaten down their teams this year by a big margin. They took care of business against Kansas State pretty much in the second half of that game back in the month of September. And then they obviously got off to a pretty slow start against Arizona, but they were able to pull away in that game and score 40 points in that one either way. BYU has kind of been the best team in my opinion in the Big 12. I don't really understand why Iowa State is up ahead of the Cougars, to be honest. I mean, I know Iowa State's got a win over, Iowa and everything, but that's not really a good win on their resume. BYU has a couple wins over SMU and Kansas State, so I don't really understand why the Cougars, they are behind Iowa State in the rankings, but either way, the Cougars have been the most dominant team in the Big 12. Oklahoma State on the other side, they're 3-3, just like UCF. It's been a disappointing start to the season. The Cowboys have not won a conference game just yet. They got one of the best running backs, from last year in Ollie Gordon. I mean, he hasn't been that really good, to be honest. He hasn't really been that terrific of a running back. We were kind of expecting him to be one of the Heisman favorites, to be honest, but, that hasn't been the case whatsoever. But, yeah, Oklahoma State, they can probably come out really fired up for this one. It's not really a tough place to play at BYU, but I feel like the crowd will be fired up anyway because BYU is 6-0. But, yeah, Oklahoma State, they had a bye week, so they've had some time to prepare here for this BYU team. We'll see if they can get their first win in the Big 12 Conference. But yeah, BYU, I think they definitely, don't get upsetted here, but you never know. It's a Friday night game. We saw an upset happen last week in the Big 12. It was Arizona State upsetting Utah. So could have, same thing happen here to BYU. I really don't know, but this one will be at 10:15 Eastern Time on ESPN on Friday night, October 18th, and BYU is favored by 10.5. We now go to my last least likely upset alert game, and that's Notre Dame and Georgia Tech at 3:30 Eastern Time on ESPN in Atlanta. Notre Dame favored by 10.5, and the over and under is at 49.5. This is a game that I think an upset could probably happen. Notre Dame ranked number 12th in the AP poll. Georgia Tech is sitting there at 5-2. This is a really good Georgia Tech team. They've been pretty solid all year long. Their two losses come to Louisville. I'm not sure where the other loss came from, if I can't remember correctly. I think it was to Syracuse, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I think it was Syracuse back in week number 2 or maybe week number 3. I can't really remember, but yeah, Georgia Tech is sitting there at 5-2. You kind of expect them to pull off the upset here, and I would not be shocked if an upset here happens. We've seen Notre Dame already lose to Northern Illinois this year, and again, at times, Notre Dame has not played their best football. They sometimes play their best football. Last week, they played their best football against Stanford, even though Stanford is not really that good. But that was a rivalry game, and Notre Dame pretty much dominated that whole entire game. If Notre Dame doesn't bring their A game in this one, I think Georgia Tech pulls off the upset. But if the Fighting Irish come out here like the talented team they're supposed to be, then Notre Dame probably wins this game by double digits. But I think Georgia Tech will fight hard in this game. They're going to come out really fired up, and it's definitely an upset alert type game in my opinion. So yeah, Georgia Tech and Notre Dame at 3:30 Eastern Time on ESPN. Of course, the game is in Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. So yeah, Notre Dame favored by 10.5, and these are the least likely upset alert games for this weekend. Let's now get into the most likely upset alert games, in my opinion, for this weekend. And we'll start here with a Big Ten Conference game. It's Nebraska and Indiana at noon Eastern Time on Fox. This will be the Fox noon kickoff game. Indiana favored by 6.5, and the over and under is at 50.5. Boy, what? Indiana's been a surprise team so far, in my opinion. I knew this team would be really good and very underrated coming to this year. I only predicted them to win 7 games, but I did not expect them to start out 6-0. They have got something in the right direction. The future seems really bright here for Indiana, but I kind of don't think they've been tested yet. They have wins over Power 4 teams in the Big Ten against Maryland, UCLA, and everything. I can't really remember the other team they beat and everything, but yeah, the Hoosiers kind of haven't been tested yet on a team that's on their level, and they'll get that this weekend against Nebraska. I think Nebraska's got a pretty good shot here to pull off the upset. The Cornhuskers have been a terrific team this year. Their one loss, of course, coming in a close game against Illinois, a game they probably should have won. if they would have won that game, we probably would have seen an undefeated versus undefeated top 25 matchup here, and this would definitely be the Big Ten conference game of the weekend. So yeah, Nebraska and Indiana, this ought to be a good one here. These are two well-coached teams, and I think they're both really good, consistent teams in the Big Ten as well. So yeah, Nebraska, if they pull off the upset here, I think Nebraska is definitely back in that top 25, and they're also definitely back in that conversation in the Big Ten Conference. And then Indiana, if they pull off the win here and survive, I think Indiana is for real. They're definitely a team that is definitely not a team that you don't want to sleep on for the rest of the way. So yeah, I got the Hoosiers and also the Cornhuskers here. This game will be at noon Eastern time, and I won't be shocked here if Nebraska pulls off the upset. I think this game can really go either way, but Indiana is favored by 6.5. Next up, we got Miami versus Louisville. This one's also at noon Eastern time on ABC. Miami favored by 4 points, and the over and under is at 60.5. You got Miami coming out of a bye week. They're sitting there at 6-0. Miami's had to come back from behind in their last couple games, against California and Virginia Tech. They had to come back in that second half to get back even with Virginia Tech, and they ended up pulling off the win after a really miracle play from Virginia Tech that was called off, and then, of course, that game against California. They nearly got beat in that game. They had to come back from behind in that second half to win. Cam Ward just does not want his team to lose and everything. They're sitting there at 6-0. They're still the front runners in the ACC ever since the beginning of the season. Miami wasn't my pick to win the ACC, but I feel like I'm kind of, leaning towards the Hurricanes here. But they're taking on a Louisville team that I think is definitely going to be fired up for this one. You got Louisville, though, that's coming off a pretty tough game against Virginia last weekend. They nearly got beat in that game. Yeah, Louisville probably would have lost that game. This probably won't be in the most likely upset alert category, but they ended up winning that game. So this is definitely a most likely upset alert game in my opinion. The Hurricanes, again, are favored by 4 points, so it's not really that high of a spread here. Louisville probably gets out to a pretty good start in the first half, and like I said, Miami is a second half team, so this might be one of the other comebacks here for the Hurricanes. They have kind of struggled in the last couple weeks in the first half of the season. Can Miami have a better game here, kind of compared to their first few games? I think once they got into ACC play, this Miami team has been really tested, so yeah, watch out for this one. This definitely could be an upset here. Louisville could probably pull off the upset here against Miami, but it will be at noon Eastern time here on ABC. Next up, we got the big one. It's the game of the weekend, Georgia versus Texas at 7:30 Eastern time on ABC. Texas favored by 3.5, and the over and under is at 52.5. This is a top 5 matchup. This is definitely the biggest game of the weekend and also definitely the biggest game of the year. I know Oregon and Ohio State kind of lived up to that expectation from last weekend, but this is definitely the game of the year in the SEC, I should say. You got Georgia that's coming off not a great performance against Mississippi State. Do we feel like Georgia was kind of overlooking Mississippi State and kind of focused on this Texas team? I mean, that could be the case. Georgia has not looked really good, mainly in the last couple weeks. Now, they did play against Auburn a lot better, kind of compared to the Alabama game and also the, Mississippi State game. But, yeah, Georgia's going to have to bring their A game. Just like Notre Dame, if, Georgia doesn't bring their A game in this one, they're definitely going to get, beaten here by double digits against a Texas team that's been on a row. Texas has been on a row ever since the start of the year. They beat Michigan pretty easily. They also beat Oklahoma this past weekend by a big margin, 34-3. So, yeah, Texas is looking like the best team in the country. Oregon is not really that far behind Texas and everything. But, yeah, Texas has definitely looked like the more complete team in the SEC. And I can understand why Texas is favored here by 3.5, and also just because they're playing at home, that's the reason why they're favored in this game. And just because of how Georgia's played now here since last weekend, and Georgia has just not looked like a top 5 team. But yeah, Georgia definitely didn't look like that this past weekend against Mississippi State. Does Georgia kind of overlook Mississippi State last weekend, like I said, and they were probably focused here on Texas? I really don't know. A lot of question marks here for Georgia, but this is a big game. It's going to be a really good game coming up this weekend. Both teams are pretty talented. Texas, though, with the advantage at home and everything, but Georgia might have a better defense than Texas, but Texas has a pretty good defense as well. I think it's going to really come down to whoever has the better offense and everything, and who's going to be that really good quarterback as well. But I got Texas and Georgia here at 7:30 Eastern time. This place is going to be rocking. It's going to be a really tough crowd that Georgia will face. They've been on the road already at Alabama, and they also play Kentucky. risky. So Georgia's kind of struggled on the road this year. If that road struggle again continues, Georgia really probably loses this game by double digits. But I won't be surprised if Georgia probably upsets Texas here. They're the number one team in the country. You do expect them to be fired up, and Kirby Smart knows how to win these games. So Texas and Georgia at 7:30 Eastern time, and then we go to my last most likely upset alert game, and that's also in the SEC. That's Alabama and Tennessee. This one's at 3:30 Eastern time on ABC. Alabama's favored by 2.5. The game is in Knoxville. This one, the over and under is at 55.5. Both teams ranked in the top 15. These are two 5-1 teams. Alabama has not played pretty well in the last couple weeks. Both of these teams are pretty similar in the last couple weeks. Tennessee has not played really well in the last couple weeks. They beat Florida in overtime this past weekend, 23-17. They were very lucky to get the win, in my opinion, because Florida definitely controlled much of that game. Tennessee just had to come back from behind and win that game, and then they got things going in the second half. Both offenses have kind of struggled in the last couple weeks as well. I wouldn't say Alabama has struggled on offense, but they really struggled against South Carolina this past weekend, and they head on the road here in a very tough environment. This is the third Saturday in October. It's been a really good rivalry, but Alabama's kind of dominated the series as of late, ever since Nick Saban left and everything. But this will definitely be a game that probably does decide who is the best one-loss team in the SEC, or maybe it isn't, because Texas A&M has one loss as well, but they haven't lost a conference game. So this definitely probably is a game that decides who is the best one-loss team in the SEC and everything. So yeah, this one definitely is going to be a good one here. It could be a shootout. It could be a defensive battle. I kind of do favor Tennessee a little bit here just because of the home field advantage. I wouldn't say who has the better offense, though. I think both offenses are pretty even. Defensively, Tennessee, I think, is a little bit better on defense, just kind of compared to the games that both of these teams have played. But yeah, offensively, I think both of these teams are pretty even. I would say Alabama has a slight talent advantage, but Tennessee, I think, has a real shot here to pull off the upset. They pulled it off a couple years ago for the first time in 15 years when Nick Saban, of course, was still there. So yeah, Tennessee and Alabama, this is going to be a good one here. It's the third Saturday of October, one of my top 5 favorite rivalries in the SEC all time, and it's at 3:30 Eastern time on ABC. So Alabama's favored by 2.5, and those are my upset alert games heading into week number 8 of the 2024 college football season. This is going to be a big weekend of college football. Let me guys know what you think about my upset alert games, and also give me your upset alert games down in the comments below. Thanks for watching this video, and who do you see getting upsetted this week? Let me know down in the comments below, and stay tuned for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports YouTube channel.